Hello. I just wanted to ask really quick, how many of you in the audience are teachers? All of you. Great. Well, you can all just snuggle in down here and we'll just talk to each other in a big cuddle puddle. No, I thought we have a lot of us up here, so we'll introduce ourselves one by one, and maybe you can just say something briefly about you, where you're from, and then how you relate to this particular issue at hand, which is the student-teacher relationship. And I guess I'll break the ice. So I have a studio in New York, and I never intended to be a yoga studio owner, which is probably the way of most yoga studio owners. It hits you sideways. But the way that it came about was like 10 or 11 years ago. I was teaching at a studio, even like part-time, and mostly I was a film editor, and the director of that studio, it came out, was inappropriately touching his students, his mostly female students, and it was really intense for all of us in the teaching community there, and so we kind of decided we had to leave, but then we had to make a new home, and that's how my studio came to be. It was really like, okay, we need to make a refuge, and I'm just gonna do this for a year while we have this place to all kind of keep going and teaching on our students to come to. And then 10 years later, I'm in the mines still. So I feel really connected to this particular issue, which is of course only one aspect of the student-teacher relationship, and the obviously one which has resonated a lot this year. And I just also want to say, in getting started, that's everything that happened with John Friend and Anya Sarin has happened, many times and over again in the yoga world and in the larger wellness world and in the world at large. I want to also get beyond that as well. We can certainly talk about Anya Sara, but I'd also like to talk about all of the other responsibilities that come up in the student-teacher relationship, as well as all of the incredible positive parts of that responsibility. So I will pass the mic to you.
Okay. My name's Ian, and I'm a blissologist and a surfer, and I was just trying to answer where I live. It's a difficult question, but I live at many beaches around the world. And I don't have a studio because I like to surf, and means I'm a bit of a commitment phobe, but I do interact with a lot of students, and I run teachers trainings, and I actually think we need more touch. I really do. I think that I tell all the students in our teachers training that welcome to the world of yoga teaching, and when you enter this world, you are actually officially in the business of touch, and but it needs to come from the right place. And my whole mission is to get in touch with this force called love, and to use it to be kind to my own body and our own bodies, and to develop that same sense of kindness to our communities and to nature. And that's why I call it blissology, but just as an aside, that's why I'm stoked to be here at Wanderlust, because it seems like that's going on here too, and it's awesome.
Hi there. I'm Julia McCabe, and I'm really quite excited because I live here in Whistler. So it's pretty cool to have amazing teachers here in my hometown. I'm not used to speaking in a microphone. I have sweaty armpits. Or in front of people. But I'm here mainly because I, number one, am honored to speak amongst some amazing teachers, but also I think it is a hot topic this year officially, and I too also have been holding teacher trainings for the last 2 years in Nicaragua and around the world. I'm a little bit of a vagabond as well, between Whistler and everywhere else. And I think it's I think it's important. I just want to actually just get into this discussion of it and see what comes about it organically, and give my 2 cents, and also just hear some insight into what everyone else has to say.
I'm Chris Chavez, and I'm technically from Los Angeles, but also I live on plains. So I get the chance to train teachers all over the world. We do workshops, trainings, and public classes. And it is a very difficult issue. And one of the things that, I mean, you just look at these amazing people up here, and one of the things that I've realized in this past year, and just actually from being invited to speak here, is that I think probably for the first time in yoga history, and possibly not, I may be wrong, but yoga teachers are becoming all things to all people. Because of the level of skill and education that the yoga teachers now have, there's a lot more responsibility on us as to what it is we are doing and what we're sharing. And obviously, how we go about doing that is the question. And yeah, and this is going to be an interesting debate. And keep your hands within the boundaries of the chair. Okay. Or not.
Hi, I'm Jason Nemer. I got an email from my friend Sianna maybe 6 months ago. She's like, you have to be on this panel. And I saw the email. I'm like, this is just a spam email. I didn't see it. It never happened. There's no way I'm going to sit on this panel. This is just asking for a lot of fire. And then I felt the fire initially, and I thought, okay, this is something that means something to me. So when the second email came from Sianna, I haven't heard back from you yet. I was like, okay, I really want to step up and to be able to share my perspectives, share my experiences, and this is something that will never go away. This is not something that we can solve, but this is something that we have the opportunity to become more and more skillful and find the commonality between many different perspectives of what is a skillful way to interact with students, what is an honorable way to affirm yourself as a human before a teacher, and how does that dance work with affirming what yourself is as a human and what your title or responsibility is as a teacher. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you, Sianna, for the invitation.
For the spam.
Forced invitation. Hi, I'm Janet Stone, and hi, I'm here because of her as well. So I'm based out of San Francisco, and when this came up, it was, to me, the topic of trust that really sparked an interest. And what that is to have within yourself a trust, and how that plays in the teachers that come into your life. And also just in the sense of trusting yourself to remain a student. And on this journey, there's a ton of projection, there's a ton of transference and counter-transference and all sorts of exciting stuff that can happen. But if we really tend to that space within ourselves that we can trust, and I feel like the teachers come our way and they come, the students come our way as well, so it's this counterbalance as well. So I will be moving my hands outside the framework of my chairs as I pass this on to Sianna.
Hello, I'm Sianna Sherman, and I feel really blessed to be on this panel. I feel like it's time for us to have a beautiful, mature conversation in the company of friends and open minds and courageous hearts. And my wish is that this discussion really truly be for the benefit of all beings, and that we can learn from each other, and that yoga as a whole in our worldwide global yoga community can actually flourish and thrive from these types of conversations in the way that we're willing to show up, in ourselves, for ourselves, and with each other. And essentially, my whole life has been devoted to being a student of many different traditions. And I've interacted with so many kinds of teachers along the way, and I've become a teacher along the way, but I primarily consider myself a student. And so right now, in this moment, I am definitely a student on this panel. And I just want to thank everyone for coming. So thanks for having and giving us the opportunity.
Hi, my name's Chris Calarco, and primarily I'm here because I'm Sianna's student. And I think, like you just heard Sianna say, that's generally how I think of myself. I think of myself as a student. I do teach yoga classes in Portland, Oregon, where I live, but I think of myself primarily as a student, but I'm now starting to, I guess, step into that role of being a teacher, inside myself a little bit more. So I'm kind of on both sides of the fence, and I think Yeah, it's good for now.
Yeah, let's bring it back. Bring it back.
Testing. We got it.
So we can kind of share 2 mics between each people, and that way it
Testing.
won't be
This is-
quite as
yes.
messy. So me and Ian will share, and you guys can share. So I think one of the things that it's very interesting to me and comes up a lot is the unarticulated nature of the yoga teacher in regard to ethics, because if you're a psychotherapist or you're a doctor or you're a priest, there are very clear guidelines, boundaries, and laws regarding ethical issues, and it's like so many things in the world of yoga, it's much more watery, which is great. I mean, and I'm all for. I'm just speaking personally, I'm all for there not being boards and rules and the people who say exactly how things should be, and that we need to police and guide ourselves as a community of teachers and practitioners, I think is one of the things that makes our world so powerful. But it's very difficult to navigate. And there are lots, and the boundaries are much more blurred than they would be in those other professions. And ironically, those are, the role of psychotherapist and doctor and priest or priestess are the roles that we're all playing at different times. And we all wear a lot of hats as teachers, but none of them are very clearly defined. So I'm curious, for those of you who want to speak to it, what you feel are the boundaries on the not negative side, but are the boundaries, the containers that we need to put on ourselves as teachers, and also the responsibilities on the positive side. What are our responsibilities to our students as guides, as teachers? So I kind of open the floor.
Looks like you're going to have to pick people.
All right. Well, okay. So I'll ask you, Chris. You just spoke up, so you got it. Well, the one thing that you said that resonates a lot is that in this emergent culture of yoga, which is getting bigger and broader, we are becoming more and more things to more people.
Right.
So with that, give me your feelings on the framework that you see, and in teacher trainings, what do you say to your teacher trainees about the student-teacher relationship?
Well, it's very clear that when you're a teacher, especially when you're an established teacher, students are coming to you for many things, as you described, and that gives you a sense of power. They're literally giving you power. Mm-hmm. How you define that and what it is, as you said, it's also not that clear. And so I think for me, when I teach teachers, is I train them and I teach them that you have to honor that power, because that power comes with a high level of responsibility. And when you're teaching from the place that is your truth, you have to make sure that you're doing so in a way that is bringing out the truth of the person that you are teaching. And that student is a student because they may not know the way. And your job is to guide them in all areas of that way. And I think sometimes what happens is we are also human. We're all human. And so as we're moving forward along that path with a student, it will waver sometimes. And oftentimes we don't know where the boundaries are until we've knocked up against them sometimes.
But don't you, or do you find that within the context of being a yoga teacher, very often you are prepared, or you've prepared yourself in your own path to be a guide of certain things, and then it's asked of you
Yes.
to be a teacher and a
Yeah.
leader and a force in something that you don't even feel that you're prepared to
I think
answer to?
I think probably some of the issues that come up is often not just black and white, as like a touch or something like that. I mean, sometimes the way that students will put give you their power, give you power,
Mm-hmm.
you don't recognize it. Sometimes it's not so clear. I mean, I had a student, for example, for many years. He was a really good student of mine, and he shared every aspect of his life with me, and this started to grow and grow and grow. And I just, for a long time, thought he was my friend, and we're friends, and he's my student, until he gives me an envelope full of cash, right? And it's like, oh shit, what do I do with this, And that was bumping up against.
What did you do with it?
I donated it to charity, actually, but I didn't know what to do with it because I'd never. Yeah, here's an envelope for your birthday. Here you go. And I said, no, this is inappropriate. It's beyond this relationship. It's not appropriate. Please take it back. And he said, no, I gave it to you. That's it. And so that was the very first time that I'd actually bumped up against a boundary, because I was really just giving everything I had to whoever wanted to take it, right? And that was the first time that I actually realized, wow, there's some really blurry edges here that you have to really be careful with. And I've
did that change your relationship with that student?
Yeah,
did you have to set up a whole set of boundaries?
I had to set boundaries, and I actually had to push him towards another teacher, push him away, basically. And it was very difficult, because as a teacher, you wanting students, right? But I could recognize after that it was an unhealthy relationship,
So
and
what was he expecting from the cash?
and that time, I don't know. That's the problem, is that they a lot of times it's not clear even what students are expecting. So at that point, I just backed up and I said, okay, I have to make sure when I'm giving, I give, but I don't receive anything of expectation, and start to recognize it sooner as well. So.
So I'll ask you, Ian, has anything ever happened for you with a student that's felt like it's gone beyond the comfortable bounds of that relationship?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a deep sharing of your soul when you're teaching yoga. You are definitely, we all talk about this. This is not just a physical thing, it's not this triangle pose, but you are sharing the deepest part of you. And it is definitely a physical thing, and there's definitely people who can become attracted because of that. And what you have to do in those situations is really tune in. I mean, I just want to answer your original question. It ties in with this, and I don't really think so much about boundaries. I think more about intention. And for me, how I wrestle with this question is, what's my intention? And the great thing about yoga is, even when you're doing a physical yoga pose, level 1, do this. And if you want to go deeper, why? Even at a 101 level, we're trying to check in all the time. And I think this is our work as yoga instructors, and as Chris was saying, people with power, is to really check in why we're doing what we're doing. And when I heard you ask the question, your original question, what I was thinking is, it's the same thing I try and teach now my kid, is that two things. I mean, I think kids will be fine, no matter what experience they have, if they have love in their life, right? And if they understand that their actions have consequences. And this is what you need to do as a yoga instructor, is really understand. I mean, me personally, I feel like I am a conduit for love. That's what I'm doing. And what is love? It's a difficult question. I mean, YouTube it, and you get black-eyed peas. I did this. I mean, you get the black-eyed peas, and you actually get the scorpions. So it's a complicated thing. But to me, what love is it's the opposite of selfishness, right? And so there's a balance between your own personal desires and what you want, and your ego drive, and then you have your connection to other people. And what parenting teaches you is that actually someone else's needs are more important. And all the time, I mean, as a yoga instructor, I think that it's your obligation to come back to that very basic model 15, 20 times a day and check in, like, where are you on your balance? So to answer that in terms of your second question, or even hypothetically, let's say someone was interested in a sexual relationship, I would just look at that and go, that's me just on this side of the balance, just concerned about my own selfish desires, and I'm not really looking at my connection to someone. Actually, by going there, I would create great harm. I mean, I would create harm to my relationships, someone I'm married to, obviously. I would create harm probably to this person, right? And am I in the yoga business to harm people? No, I'm not. And
But what if you, I mean, I have plenty of yoga teacher friends who've dated people who were their students on the female and the male side, and there is a time when, you know, you're having there's a student that you're attracted to and they're attracted to you, and at a certain point you want to shift that relationship. So I'm just curious to know. I'll ask actually, Janet, have you ever dated? No, I mean,
I didn't want to
we
answer
can all
that one.
open this up, but I figure this is obvious. I don't know. It's not because I know anything about your personal life, Janet.
Tell us
But
the real dirty
you're welcome
stuff.
to pass the mic after you answer. But have you ever been in a situation where there's been an attraction with a student, and then you have to change the relationship in order to have a relationship with integrity? I guess is my question, because it's absurd to say, okay, teachers can never date their students. It just has to be done in a respectful way, where you obviously are, you go from being teacher and student before the relationship evolves. To me, that seems to be the first clear step. But it's never happened to me. I've been married for like 500 years, so.
First of all, I just want to know if these pants are inappropriate. No?
No.
Okay?
Not at all.
Yeah? You're good. Okay, it's all right. Okay, then. Okay.
Yeah.
I have.
She's amazing
Well, I can
underwear.
take them off because this actually. Thank you. Now I feel. Yeah. I do feel a little bit better now. I would never ever. No, it basically goes back to what Ian was saying about intention and integrity, of course, and also clarity of what the teachings are. I mean, I feel like teachers now are no longer gurus in our current culture, and they're not aerobics teachers. So we're sort of somewhere in this weird slide, and the conversation is now just beginning, it feels like, to me. Maybe it's been going on for a while, but how do you make that transition? How do you actually look toward what are the responsibilities for both people who are showing up, that means the student and the teacher, where, in the sense of power, I heard that term a couple of times, and it just feels like, as the teacher, yes, maybe someone wants to hand me their power, but what I'm here for is actually as a conduit, as a reflection back, not so much to hold anybody's power for them. My journey fully is to just reflect that back and really tend my own road, daily, minute by minute, second by second, to make sure that my intention is coming from the place I want it to come from. Because once again, I mean, there's a lot of muddy waters. There's a lot of narcissism that's being fed, and I'm not saying that in a negative term. It's just the ego of both the teacher wanting to be uplifted and also the student wanting to be seen and sort of like, carried, and like, oh, yes, great. And sort of there's an agreement that happens sometimes to feed this type of dynamic. And it's sort of bringing light and awareness and even just acknowledgement into what that is, and it happens on such subtle levels, and it happens on really big levels. And I feel like, the amount of the touch, the such, I feel like that is just some very small, well, it can be big, but byproduct of what the root is here, of what are the teachings that are happening, and what is being sort of offered back and forth. Jason, do you have anything you want to say about this?
Yeah, that was a big evasion. Interesting, but I guess I would say, forget you. I don't mean to ask about your personal life, but I think it is an important thing to be able to talk about. One second, I'd love to hear what you have to say. But let's just say, what are you going to say to your teacher trainees if they were to ask, well, what if I have a student and I'm actually genuinely attracted to them, and I've thought about it, and I know that it's not just a passing thing, and I want to actually, how do I do this responsibly? So what would you say? Anybody who wants to speak to that.
I'd love to chime in here.
Yes, please.
So I don't know why it is. I don't know if it's human nature, I don't know if it's Western culture, but you put the news on and you see all the gnarly things that happen in the world, and you don't see the beautiful stories. So I wanted to share a few beautiful stories that I've witnessed. I was at this retreat center in Santa Barbara, And there's this probably 60-year-old Mexican woman, 60-year-old white guy, and they came into the teacher training and they were offering they do some shamanism, they do some different things. And we just wanted to tell you our story because you guys are going to be yoga teachers and we have a really sweet story. The woman was a yoga teacher. The guy was this student. And, he shows up to the class and they fell in love. And you don't choose who you fall in love with. In my experience, love is, one of the things that you said about love is like, how do you define it? You YouTube it, you Google it. Love is something that is a really mystical energy, and we work with mystical energies in this practice. So when you fall in love with somebody, from there's a lot of very intelligent discernment choices that you can make based on your experience, based on the people around you, and they've lived like 40-year life together, super in love. Some of you guys know the Yoga Slackers, Jason and Chelsea. I talked to them. They said it was okay, I could bring up their story. Jason, he went to a teacher training as a guest teacher for like 3 days. As soon as he walked in the room, Chelsea saw him. He's like, oh my God, that's my husband. She saw it clearly. She knew it. He didn't see her at all in the beginning. And, there was some energy that was exchanged. And every circumstance is going to have such a unique thing. And something that I've learned from one of my teachers, he says, there's not one technique for 100 students, but there's 100 techniques for one student. So every individual relationship that you have as a yoga teacher, you have a lot of opportunity to be very skillful in how you act. And right now, there is a lot of yoga scandal that's been, spread through all the different social media channels, and people are reading that and really fixated on that. And I've seen a lot of really beautiful relationships that come out of a teacher-student relationship that can be navigated skillfully. And in my experience, the way that it can be skillful, myself as a teacher, am I doing things that I feel like I have to hide? Am I doing things that I feel like I could tell my mom about? And this is my internal compass, and everyone has a different internal compass, and non-sustainable activities will not sustain. If you're doing things that are hurting people again and again, it's not going to bode well for you as a yoga teacher. So I think to some degree these things work themselves out, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk about it. I love that we're talking about it, but I think that it can be balanced in how we look at things, and it is gray, as it has already been said.
So do you feel, and I'll ask you, but I'm curious to know from anybody here, do you feel like there is a place in our community for guidelines? I mean, because there are and there aren't. Everything at the end of the day, right now, there's teachings and there's precedent and there's, basic human ethics, but there isn't much in the way of navigating rules. And like I said, I mean, I'm all for kind of anarchy, because it creates choice and individuality and creativity. But sometimes it would be nice to have a touchstone. So I'm still interested to know what any of you who have an opinion about it would say to a fellow teacher who came to you or a teacher trainee who came to you about, how do I handle this?
I'd like to chime in.
Yeah.
So it's a conversation I've been having recently. And what's been offered to me and the thoughts that I've had around it, that if someone's your student and you're interested, they're interested in you, you're interested in them, it's probably good for them not to be your student while you're initiating that relationship. And to set that boundary as the relationship happens. If the relationship continues to flourish and they're living happily ever after for the next 5-10 years, then they might come to your class. But to navigate both of those relationships at the same time, starting a relationship and continuing a yoga teacher, yoga student relationship, has a lot of, could be quite fraught with the power differential. Yeah.
And I think that's the difficult thing, is knowing when it's a differential and when it's just chemistry, right? And I think there's probably many markers, and as much as there's not. One of the things when all of this stuff was happening this past year, and I think you're exactly right when you said this internal compass, the word dharma was pushed around a lot, and you heard it a lot. And one of the interesting things that I thought is that dharma, or truth, has its own survival mechanism. It has its own life energy, and so if it is damaged in any way, it'll sort itself out. And in that, when these things, when our dharma is not being served, I think in some scale it will affect us in our lives. And like you said, the internal compass will either serve you well or bring you down.
Can you give me an example?
You just can.
No, I'm curious. I mean, from yourself or just in your experience?
No, I mean, it's mainly, you know, like in my early days of teaching, you know, I was very much about giving, and like he talked about the concept of love, you know, and when there are many people that will come and they need love in their life, and there's many people who are lonely and they need companionship, and they will come to the yoga teacher, and if the yoga teacher's just open giving, they sometimes misinterpret that. They will take it in the wrong way. But as he said, there needs to be more touch. I had an example in a yoga class when I was a young teacher, and it really affected me for the rest of up until now. I had a student that came into my class, and she was just doing a downward facing dog, and I just put my hand on her back, and she started to cry. And I was a little freaked out. I was like, oh, what did I do, you know? And she came up and she said, well, you may not be able to appreciate this because you're a young guy. She said, but, you know, I'm in my late 50s, early 60s. And when you touched me, I couldn't remember when the last time I was touched with affection was. And, oh, I'm going to cry now. So, yeah, so in that sense, I was really blown away. So as Ian said, there is, here, I'll give it to you.
No, make sure you finish.
No, I'm going to cry.
He's gonna cry. But you know. I mean, I love what everyone said so far. I'm really with everyone. But you know, when someone's not coming from that space that Chris is trying to describe, right? Like, I'm actually coming back to the question you asked me a while ago now. Sorry, I keep answering your questions after you asked me a couple. But I was actually thinking about it. I'm like, I start every yoga class with a hug. Like, I mean, everyone, we hug. That's what we do. I'm not joking. We literally, it's non-authoritarian. It freaks people out from the East Coast. But that's what we do. It's non-authoritarian. You don't have to, but, and I think that's what people need. I mean, we live in a world where if you cut yourself as a school kid, the teachers can't put Band-Aids on you. I mean, we've completely let go of touch, which is horrible, and I think we got to counter that. But you know when someone's coming from a place where they have power, which was what Chris was addressing before, and they're just taking advantage of that. You know, basically it's an unlevel playing field. Like, you are not, you're this person that when they see you, the person will kind of throw their moral judgment away and just like, this guy's a guru, or this guy is a rock star. And actually that's one thing I want to mention is, you know, I saw this movie last night about it, and I think this might help our conversation too, because it's so personal as yogis. And what Janet was saying, are we gurus or are we yoga teachers? I mean, one thing that gets thrown around a lot is yogi rock stars. And I mean, it's like we're musicians. No, I mean, no matter what, you know, what musicians do and what yogis do is as a yogi, people, you know, you walk around like life is pretty good, or maybe it's all about worries or problems, and then, you know, they do it. When you hear good music, you basically go, you hear the song, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, life is amazing, and let's sing. And this is what we do as yoga teachers, is we get people to sing inside, you know. And so it's this elevation. I think this is the connection between yogis and maybe not rock stars, but musicians. So where I'm going with this is, and hopefully this makes it less personal for us, is I watched a documentary last night about a musician. And I won't mention the name, but I mean, this is someone who I love, you know, one of my top 5 musicians I admire, and his wife was in the band, and he had affairs all over the world with all these different, I don't know, groupies, whatever you would call them, and to me, I went, oh, it doesn't really fit with how I would do things. And even when I was listening to the music that he was teaching, I'm like, it doesn't really fit there. But there's 2 things. One is you realize that some people, when they do what they're doing, whether it's teaching yoga or not, there's something that comes through them in that moment, and it brings out their best. You know, and then that kind of hypnotizes other people to not view their actions outside of that. You know, and I think I'm all for not having guidelines. You know, I'm with you, but we have to have a check-in all the time, right? And the people in relationship, I mean, yoga is really about the yoga of relationship. The people all involved with that relationship need to talk it out. So this guy who's a musician, not a yoga teacher, he's a musician, and he needs to say to his wife who's in the band, hey, I'm going to shag this woman now. And he has to say, look, to her, I'm in a committed relationship, or, I'm in a relationship anyway, and are you cool with this? And this has to be, and I don't know, probably if you look at that scenario, someone's going to get hurt, And so really, as a musician or yoga teacher, you have to go, am I okay with hurting someone in order to me feel my physical needs and maybe abuse power to get there?
But I would go so
Schuyler.
far as to say that and I do agree with you that there are similarities in the role of the musician and the yoga teacher, just by virtue of leading something that inspires good feelings in people, it creates that dynamic. But if no one judges a rock star for profligately fathering or mothering multiple children out of wedlock or whatever, married or not married, is really immaterial. But I think the difficulty with being a yoga teacher is we don't take vows. The priest who has to be defrocked in order to get married. It's very clear what's happening if we're talking about these, moving past these boundaries. But we don't have these boundaries, and very often I feel like yoga teachers, we sort of slip into this role of having a greater responsibility we start out teaching asana. Yeah. Most of the time we start out with, oh, I love this feels good, I'm going to start teaching this. And then it gets much heavier. And people come to you because they're sick. And you become responsible for their wellness or helping them through their sickness or their parent dying or their child's problem. I mean, it gets very deep very quickly if you continue long enough. And it's tough to be able to assume that role responsibly when you haven't really prepared yourself for it, unless you just happen to have a very strong moral compass. And so, yes, Janet, one sec. I guess one thing that I would like to ask anybody who really wants to speak to it is, because we don't have board, we don't have ethics boards, and we don't even have a book or a manual that talks about this. How do you handle this when it happens among your peers? And yes, you can pipe in.
I'm going old school.
Please.
Has anyone heard of the 8 limbs? I know. I'm just going to pull out the 8 limbs as the rules and guidelines. I mean, it's moral compass is very movable. It's a movable thing, and I feel like the 8 limbs, if you're actually in this practice and really immersed in this practice, and not just doing a chaturanga, but actually with ahimsa and with truthfulness. And it aligns up from heels to crown of the head, but it lines up from when you wake up in the morning to when you go to bed. And I just wanted to hand it off to Siana and see if she had anything to say.
Thank you. I like the old school. Thanks. What I'm thinking about really is the teacher's commitment to their own practices as the ground for all of this to unfold. There can be the conversation of what we should do from the outside in the way of creating a code of conduct and, a touchstone, as you said, which is a nice way to say it. But ultimately, the responsibility is going to have to be a natural and spontaneous upsurge from the ground of being inside each teacher. And in yoga, no matter what tradition or style we're practicing, every single tradition of yoga calls us to self-recognition, calls us to practice so that we polish the mirror of our hearts, so that we can really see the situation clearly. And when those situations arise, that we remember the Vimarsha Shakti, the reflective power of the moment, that whatever the situation is, it has to bounce back inside of us to look deeper and to grow ourselves because of that. So, I shared a relationship with a man for 5 years that began as my student. And it was one of the most extraordinary relationships of my life, one of the greatest loves of my life. And when he showed up, we knew pretty quickly that there was a great attraction, and then we sat down and we had a conversation, and we said, okay, are you having this attraction? I'm having it. I started having dreams about this student. And so what I would do is I would do my practices and check in with myself and ask, like, what is this about? Am I as the teacher projecting something? Because we often hear, oh, the projection coming onto us, but there's multiple directions of this. And as we're all, in the purificatory fires of yoga, teachers and students, a lot comes to the surface. And we're in a collective shadow dance, in a certain way too. And so we have to keep bringing it back to ourselves and knowing ourselves. So when this man and we sat down and we talked and we had a very real and beautiful conversation, and we chose that we would explore the relationship. And so I said, well, if this is our choice, then I really want to ask you to find other teachers, because I don't want to be your teacher and your lover. It's just too much for me to consider. So we just got really clear with it. And I do not regret that choice. That was one of the most gorgeous experiences of my life. So I wouldn't want to take that away from anyone, but I would just keep saying that we have to keep encouraging each other. Go to your practices, 8 limbs, whatever you're committed to and dedicated to in your practices, know your intention and really know it. Know it clearly, know it fully, not sort of guessing what your intention is or sort of halfway showing up, but show up fully and start by showing up fully in yourself. And then we can make really conscious, skillful choices, and that's what yoga is, skillful choices in the world that's rooted from the ground of our being, which is love, which is recognition, which is the pulse of the essence of life itself. So I guess what I really want to say is, every teacher and every student, practice, know yourself, and have a mature, beautiful, skillful conversation, and make smart choices, and be accountable for what is your stuff, and that includes the teachers and the students, all of us.
And which makes complete, I totally agree, and I think we're all in agreement here that the thing is to shift the power. That it's very important that if there's any kind of a student-teacher relationship that develops beyond just being fairly clear, that that dynamic needs to shift first. And I'm interested to note that it worked. And I've seen it work with lots of teachers that I know who've ended up, not necessarily in long-term relationships, but that it's been a mature and sustainable relationship from teacher to student. But I'm also interested to know, because I definitely agree about it coming back to being your own clear mirror, but at the same time, I'm interested in, as a collective, how we handle these issues, and not just in the sexual realm, in power dynamics. When you see a teacher who, they may not be hitting on their students or anything like that, but you see them taking their power in an inappropriate way, in it becoming an ego relationship instead of an actual fluid channeling relationship. So I'm just curious to know if any of you here have had that experience with a peer, whether it's a teacher who teaches at your studio or a teacher that you teach with, because I think since we are our own collective group of ethicists, as it were, it's a difficult position to be in with your peers. So
you see somebody else completely take advantage of their situation.
Yeah, and whatever that may be, how have you handled it?
Like for me to observe a teacher taking advantage of another student situation. Oh man. Oh, I was gonna say something else, but now. I think that number one, it's me. I personally, when I come into the studio, call me a bit of a prude, but I enter the space and I really see it. I really diffuse any kind of energy that might be considered sexual or anything beyond, my role as a teacher, I tell my teachers in my teacher training that number one, teacher first before even being a friend. Teachership becomes before friendship even. So there's a certain, now right away for me, I can diffuse any energy that's coming at me from a weird, funky angle. But in terms of actually observing another teacher, getting involved, it's tough. If it's a really good friend of mine that I'm teaching with, I might be able to have a one-on-one and give them my insight. But I mean, ultimately, what can you do? I can't necessarily police the actions of my friends and.
So you feel like it's not your role. I mean, which is a totally valid answer. I'm not looking for right or wrong at all. I mean, I don't even know what my opinion is necessarily, but I'm curious to know, are we each other's moral compass, or are we, how do we, I'm not even with a friend, but within our community.
Sure.
I've been in classes where I've seen teachers inappropriately touch, and one of the fascinating things that you realize is they're not aware that they're doing it. Right? They may touch, and actually I saw a teacher recently who is probably one of the most sweetest souls on the planet that you could ever meet, and he was touching really lightly and in a sensual way only because he didn't want to disturb the student's energy. So he thought that was a way of respecting the student, whereas the student may take that totally differently. Right, and I saw it in a different way. So, I mean, one of the things when I see that, I mean, most of the time when I go to a class or the teacher will sometimes ask afterwards, so what do you think, or whatever. And in a situation like that, I just, hey, maybe on the physical adjustments, you could be a little bit more, stronger with your hands, or a little bit more precise in the way you touch someone. And a couple of times I've had that conversation. Because it looked like to me like it could be seen as sensual. So just be careful with that and just do this and this, But it's not necessarily a sense of policing as it is I know the guy's soul, I know that guy, and that's not his intention. And so, I mean, and I've also been in classes where the teacher has that intention, and I just, it's not, I didn't feel comfortable talking to the teacher about it. Instead, I just didn't go back.
I'll add to what I just said. I had some friends when I was teaching elsewhere outside of Whistler, where a student was giving them gifts, like big money items, like literally like a washing machine.
I need those students.
It started off with little items like clothing, and then like tickets to concerts, and it was really repetitive, and it was becoming this. From the outside in, I didn't receive any of these gifts, but from the outside in, I could see that it was very much the student wanting to somehow own or have part of that
Which
teacher's
is its own
energy.
power dynamic.
For sure. So I did say something, and that still didn't stop that teacher, that collection of teachers they were all receiving these really big item gifts, to a point where I think there was actually a car involved. Yeah. And so I don't know. I don't know if that was actually, if they actually took the car, but
Adjustments were
Can we do a workshop on those adjustments?
But I thought that this was incredibly inappropriate. Right from the start. Even I feel uncomfortable to a certain extent. It's fine from time to time if a student gives you a small gift or a token of love, or that's really sweet, and I really take that with kindness, especially if a letter or something really from the heart. But that was an example where I did say something, and it still wasn't taken into consideration. Ultimately, it's up to each individual to take responsibility for their own, whatever they decide to do with their role as a teacher. You can, yeah.
I think our community is so in touch with each other. I mean, it's interesting because what's really happened in our world is yoga has become really popular, and so has the internet. I think people are having these conversations a lot on the internet, and not everyone's going to feel the same way. Because I actually think that the goalposts are actually more shiftable than you may think. I mean, even in the 8 limbs, I used to date someone, and she was like, "No, it's all about cleanliness, Saucha," and I'm like, "No, it's about if."
Like Brahmacharya. I mean, it really would there would be no dating at all.
Exactly. I'm like, no, it actually means no love, no sex outside the relationship. Like, no, it means actually no sex. Right? And, so there's so much up for interpretation, even within the 8 limbs, I think. I really do. But and I think that what's kind of going on organically just really needs to step up, because I really don't think we need a board to judge yoga ethics. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but as yogis, we check in with our bodies, and I feel like, oh, we're becoming one of them.
Well, ultimately, on the positive side, I do feel like, I think, Chris, you were alluding to this too, is that these things do come out in the wash. I mean, it all comes around, and because we are not the small town parish priest who's doing this or that, or your doctor or your psychotherapist, it's people, your students always have the right to leave for whatever reason, if they're getting a bad, if there's a bad relationship anywhere, and then eventually your studio or your community will resolve the issue. And even if it's intensely painful and difficult, the way it was with John, I do feel like the community resolved the issue, and it didn't need a board of ethics. It as difficult as it may have been, it made its way through its own system, and I think that's the really positive thing about an organism that is flexible and creative and self-responsible.
I guess the point I want to quickly make, and I'll stop talking about, is that the role of the students to not give their power away, because this is what we do continuously. And my friend Joel Kramer, he writes whole books about this, but to not just give power away to people, but to keep holding them accountable. And I think that's the other part of it that needs to be educated, is not just the role of the teachers, but the role of the students.
Well, and that your role as a teacher ultimately is to teach the student that they are their own teacher. And you are just one particular conduit for whatever particular body of information you may be transmitting. But ultimately, this is the great thing about our tradition, is that everyone is their own teacher. Ultimately, they are their own best teacher.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear. So we have to wrap it up, and I want to leave some time to take some questions from you guys. But I guess I want to end on a couple quick questions. We'll just go down the line. 2 questions. The first is, what is and if you just want to pass, you can pass. What is a positive responsibility that you have as a teacher that you didn't expect that you were taking on when you first became a teacher? What did you not yet know that you were going to have to embody as part of your teaching role? And if you don't have an answer, that's okay too. There's no, we won't make you stay.
So for me, one of the most positive things that I've really been stepping into, especially this year, is just the shifting of my reality that difficult situations, difficult students are not, I haven't painted them as good or bad. I'm really just taking on these things as an ability for me to sharpen my tools, and I want to do a lot of really big, beautiful things in the world. So being able to recognize and realize that when there are really daunting things that are in front of me, being able to take a breath and know that these things are here to affirm who I am and to give me tools that will support my students. So that's been a really positive thing that I hadn't seen coming, and it's a good year to be practicing that way in my experience. It's been a lot that's been shifting, and yeah.
Good.
I wasn't aware that people, excuse me, would actually listen to me. And the biggest thing I've learned about that is to simply only teach from my own experience. Because if I'm teaching from any other place, then they're listening to something that isn't true. And now that I've learned that they actually do listen to me, I do that much, much more in my planning of my classes and any teaching that I offer. I make sure that it's something that I've experienced and that resonates with me.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite prepared for, all the adulation and praise that would come with the territory, and along with that, the blame as well. It's very Bhagavad Gita, the praise and the blame kind of come hand in hand, and 2 sides of the same coin. So as I deepened into teaching and going there, there's so much that comes and you have to field it. And it's so easy to want to say yes to the praise and like, thank you. And then when the other thing comes, oh, I didn't like the way you said that or did that or you did this, it's very, that's more difficult to receive. So I think one of the greatest integrations really that has been happening and will always continue is that I get out of my own way and allow the experience to unfold, for each person's journey. And then ultimately, I know that I'm a facilitator of safe space that people can tap into themselves. And they might have to go through all sorts of stories where maybe I'm the one that they thank for it or the one that they are not, feeling so grateful to at the moment. But that I have to get out of my own way to be that clear conduit and channel. And that's the practice all the time. And, one of the ways I think of brahmacharya, actually, since that word's been brought up, okay, so we go, celibacy, this view of it. But I also look at it as the acharya as the one who walks the path of Brahma, and Brahma meaning like the universal. So walking the path of cultivating a continual remembrance of the bigger flow of what's actually happening, and that I am doing the best I can in this human body and with the gift of my voice and my particular way of expressing these teachings, but ultimately I'm a servant of the Shakti, and I am going to do my best to remain in that flow and to walk that path.
What she said. No, I mean for real, what she said.
I think for me, one of the things I wasn't prepared for is not being able to turn teacher off. Like those of you guys, travel internationally, you spend a lot of time with students outside of class as well. So you are always, in one sense, elevated, but you're literally called to be your higher self all the time. There's been many times where, I've been in traffic and I'm ready to flip a finger out the window. Somebody will pull up alongside me and go, "Hey, I was in your class last week." So, and I'm human, right? I'm human, but also to recognize it is that now what's being called in me is to be the best self that I can be all the time, which then is self-inquiry to go within and say, what is that self? Where is my truth? Where is it coming from? And then do the best that I can to act from that space. Is it going to be perfect? No, absolutely not. My wife will tell you that. But as long as I think as we're doing the best that we can, and we are checking into our hearts and saying, where's this coming from? Why am I doing this? And just keep coming from that space and keep sharing from that space, and I think it'll all work out.
And so would you say that in that shift from student to teacher, you were forced to live your yoga more?
Yes.
This is where you're...
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah,
and that for me now, it doesn't feel like it ever turns off. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's exhausting, and then sometimes it's a reaffirmation that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So when I step into it, it's awesome. When I fight it, it sucks. With that.
I would agree with Chris that I wasn't expecting, when I amped up my teaching and especially doing teacher trainings and then living in a small town and, being in the, grocery store lineup and bumping into all my students, and then that same night going out to the bar with a friend, and the friend passes me her drink and then her cigarette to hold, and then I'm standing out on the patio, and it's like the duty of as a teacher / student, and in one way it has made me a better person, but to also, if I feel like flipping the bird and if I feel like having a drag of their cigarette, I should be okay with that, and I shouldn't have to explain myself, because again, we're all human and none of us are Buddhas and none of us are perfect.
But let me just bring it back around to my initial question, which was, which is not unrelated to this issue of who you are and who you become because of the path that we're on as teachers. But I'm interested in what you feel like, what you didn't expect that your responsibilities would contain, how encompassing your job would be. Does that make any sense? Like, I mean, I know for myself, I very much started teaching as an asana teacher. I mean, that's really where I was coming from. I'm about to bring people into their bodies so that they felt better in their bodies, so they could be better people simply because they felt better in their bodies. Very much where I was practicing from and where I started teaching from. And then I was very surprised at how quickly people expected me to be responsible for their heart and their health, their larger health and their soul. And so because they expected that, then I had to step up to the plate as best I could, which was awesome and awful all at the at the same time. But I'm just curious to know on the because the negative sides, the barriers are pretty obvious and have been hashed out a lot. But I also think there's this amazing elevation and grace that comes with being put in a position to help people help themselves. And so I'm just interested in your own, in all of your personal experience, where that beautiful opening happens in what's like it could be seen negatively as a power sharing relationship, but it's the lovely part, the really lovely part of the student teacher relationship, which we all know is the greatest, the most of it is this amazing exchange. Otherwise, we wouldn't all be participating in it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I think I totally get what you're saying, but I think also it's to not get too overwhelmed or, if a student is, I guess, if a student comes to me and they have like a matter of the heart, I'm there to listen and to hold space, but I'm not going to get too overly involved or too connected or too attached to what their life experience may be. So if there's a certain there's a certain diffusing that I do as a teacher where I'll be a part of that process and I'll listen and I'll be more a space holder than anything. And I think that as soon as I go home and think, oh my God, I'm all this and this person is coming to me with all their stuff, then it becomes a big thing. When I make it a big thing, then it becomes a big thing. But if I'm just there as a part of their experience, like as a circle in their growth, then
very
amazing.
much what Sianna was saying about being a part of the reflection.
Yeah, and I think that there's just got to be like a almost a tacit understanding between teacher and student that I'm not their psychotherapist, I'm not their physiotherapist, I'm not there's certain professional roles that we as yoga instructors try to take on, and it's just too much, like the weight of the world. At the end of the day, we're creating a beautiful experience for them on the mat. We establish sometimes the odd relationship that is special, like Sienna was saying, her experience with her 5-year relationship, and I think that's really special, but that's also unique. When I enter the classroom again, I don't enter it and see it as a dating pool. I see it as an experience where I'm going to be teaching people what I know to the best of my ability, and All right. I kind of went off on tangents there,
right.
but.
Actually, my background's a little bit different because I got into yoga through philosophy. I got into philosophy because my inspiration when I was in high school was Joseph Campbell, and he said, follow your bliss. And the second part of that is follow your bliss, and where once there were walls, soon there will be doors. And so I thought about it long and hard, and I'm like, what is my bliss? And similar to what everyone's expressed here, and what I've said already, my bliss is actually being a conduit for love. So I went to study philosophy, which is how I got into yoga, philosophy, and Eastern religions, and meditation, yoga. And then my original goal was to be a professor of the philosophy of love. I mean, check that out for a resume patter. And actually, yoga came afterwards, the physical yoga practice. I never thought I could teach yoga because I was so tight. I mean, I was an extreme sport athlete, and it just came so easily to so many people. I'm like, oh my, and then it took me a lot of confidence to be like, oh, if I can just get true on this love message, that it doesn't matter about how physically adept you are. So where I want to go with this is that I knew. I understood the Joseph Campbell message of like follow your bliss and things are going to somehow work out. What I didn't know is what I call now the Ganesha principle, which is tied in with when I surf, the whitewater principle. What I mean is the doors just don't open. That there's obstacles that are always put in your way. So from day one, when I first started teaching yoga in Vancouver, there was only one other yoga studio in Vancouver. And there was just a kind of handful of yoga teachers. I'm like, I know this city is ripe for yoga. And so I started renting a space and teaching yoga, and no one showed up. No one. I mean, for 2 months, right? No one. And I'm like, I know I'm ready to do this. I know it's my mission. And to me, I look at that now and go, that was Ganesha saying to me, why are you doing what you're doing? And are you willing to do what you're doing for free? Are you willing to actually pay money to do this? Because that's what it amounted to. I was renting a space and not having anyone come, right? And in surfing, I'm a surfer, I looked at this, and everyone looks at pictures of surfing, and you watch surf videos, and you're like, oh my God, those guys just ride waves all day, but mostly what you do is paddle, right? And you got to go through this whitewater, and sometimes it's terrifying. I mean, you look at these massive waves, and you got to somehow go under it. And to me, that's Ganesha in the water, right? And it's the same thing. This Ganesha principle makes you go, why am I doing what I'm doing? I mean, why am I not just sitting on the beach having a margarita with everyone else on the lawn chair, right? And what will happen if I can align my passions with the outer world? And magic happens when you get out there. And that's what I've really learned, is just this whole Ganesha principle, and what a gift these obstacles really are, and what a chance this really is to learn. And thinking about the larger context of our conversation, it does tie in, because I feel like, there's a reason why we're all having this conversation. And I feel like this whole thing is one big obstacle in front of a lot of people, and it's making us really get clear, and it's a big blessing underneath it all, and we're so fortunate to have it. So I hope we can be not just mirrors for each other, but support systems, because you're right, we're out to sea. We're paddling around, and there's currents pulling us every which way, and we're not given a map. We're just trying to figure it out. And so we actually need our community to go, hey, how about this? How about that? And this didn't really work, and you might have to justify it, and then we'll go, oh, okay, I get it, right? So these obstacles are beautiful, and that's what I really learned, is that. And it is our gift in front of us now with this conversation.
Good, well put. Okay, so I think we'll open the floor up for about 10 minutes of questions, if anyone has any. Yeah.
Hello, I'd like to ask the panel where they see yoga in 100 years from now, both in terms of the teacher-student relationship and any rules or regulations that I personally would regret being introduced.
100 years?
I think it's coming, but
It won't be our concern. Yeah. He's got some.
So I feel like something that I saw in Jamaica that really just moved me is this group called Yoga Angels, and they teach children how to teach other children yoga. And there's just so much about certification, and you have to do it this way, and this is right yoga, and this is wrong yoga. And I see a big trend of people in the parks sharing the love of movement, sharing the love of yoga, and it's never going to take away from what it is to study from a really rich lineage of people that have tremendous knowledge, that have traveled the world. And there's something really beautiful about transmission-based yoga. So I feel like in 100 years, I think that the pyramid will keep climbing. There'll be teachers that know even more and have gone even deeper in their practices. But there's going to be a huge foundation of people that are willing and able to share their joy for yoga with their grandma, with their friends, with everybody. That's my vision, my hope.
I hope that it's officially allowed in hospitals and like settings like, I mean, is it officially allowed in hospitals, or is it, like an actual, like to be able to have like a yoga therapist come into like, does that happen now? Oh, yeah, maybe in Canada. Okay, then they're in a really like modern hospital.
But you can't wear those gowns because in Downward Dog they don't wear.
And also, I think what you see up here is you see a lot of people that are following their truth and doing the best to bring that out in the world. And I think yoga will come off the mat, and it's going to start to spread into areas of society where people are just really encouraged by people like this to do what you love and do it and in doing so it becomes a spiritual act. And I think we're going back that way. So I think it's awesome.
And I see the integration, so on the mat, off the mat, and the integration of all the practices of yoga, once more coming into a flourishing place inside the practices. So the asana is very prevalent for many people, and it's great because asana just breaks you open, it cracks you open, and students are so much more willing to explore everything that yoga has to offer. So I see yoga coming into the hearts of so many in this integrated way, and meditators all over the planet. And I think that would be an outrageous act of yoga for as many people as possible to be deeply meditating and studying and living in as harmonious ways as possible with the planet and with each other.
Actually, can I answer this exactly? And I think that, I hate to say it, but I think we're going to have a board. I think we're going to have a yoga ethics board, and it deflates me to say it, but I think it's coming. I think so. Because, okay, if it keeps getting, if the popularity trend keeps going, I mean, this is the whole thing, is we're lucky right now that we can be our own mirrors, as we keep talking about. It's a real heyday, we're lucky to live in this period where at least we can decide what's works for us or not. But as anything gets bigger, it's like it gets codified. And if basically, I hope it doesn't. I think this is the big, beautiful thing that we've got going on in the yoga. I hope it doesn't. But human nature being human nature. I mean, tell me, okay, here it is that we're trying to work this out, and all of us, everyone partaking, listening to this conversation is trying to work it out, and that's a beautiful thing. But it's difficult, and I just look at so many other things. I mean, I think we're mystics. I hear a lot of mystical thing, and the thing about mystics versus religions is that religions live in answers and mystics live in questions, right? And we're trying to live in questions. Is this right? Is this not right? Does this feel good? Does this not feel good? But it's almost, if I look at, try and name to me anything outside of this yoga realm that is still, I mean, I don't know, you tweet something wrong in the Olympics and you get kicked out, right? I mean, everything has a governing body, right? And who thought we were going to have a standard for yoga teachers trainings, for what it is to have a 500-hour yoga teacher training? That used to be, not long ago, 5-10 years ago, that was just, hey, you can work that out. But now we have kind of a...
Actually, I mean, it's toothless. I mean, really, and this is off topic, but I do think it totally relates. And I mean, I don't disagree with you, but I hope you're wrong.
I hope I'm wrong too.
And
I hope I'm wrong too, believe me.
No, I know you do, but it only will happen if enough people capitulate. And the yoga teacher line, like that, it's a sham organization. I mean, no, I mean, not to say that there isn't any, I mean, it only exists because the larger community has agreed more or less that we need some sort of structure to say what is and what isn't, but it isn't any more than our collective decision that the Yoga Alliance means something. Does that make any sense? If we had an ethics board that was no more than that, I think it's something that people could live with. If it became something that was actually governed on high, that's something else entirely. And believe me, the state is trying to get in on it. I mean, this, in the same way that the state, I don't know if it's happening in all states, but in New York 2 years ago, the state tried to come in and govern yoga teacher trainings. So the Yoga Alliance, it's our own community's basic collective decision to have a governing body. But if New York State came in the same way that they regulate massage, if they came in and they regulate our teacher trainings and then come to regulate our whole industry, that will be when an ethics panel gets established by an outside body. Does that make sense? And it was fought by all of the small studios in New York that said, absolutely no, we don't want the state governing. And that's gonna have to happen community by community and state by state. You know, on all of those levels, if we do not want our industry to be co-opted. And what we are is we are a huge collection of cottage industries right now. And if we want to keep it that way, it's that as cottage industries we come together and we say, no, we don't want actually a governing body. We want to be a collective. Anyway, that went way off topic. Anyway, yes.
Hi. So I have a comment and a question. My comment is that, like Chris, I come into this community primarily in studentship, but I do have another life as a professor in a university. And one of the things that strikes me about the yoga community when they start talking about ethics and boundaries is that they think there's something very special about being a yoga teacher. And you wouldn't have thought that someone whose job it was to teach 17th century British poetry would have had to learn all the very same things that you say you've had to learn, Schuyler. I have to talk to students about their own cancers. I have to talk to students about their dying parents,
Absolutely.
about their pregnancies. So my wish for the yoga community, especially in matters of ethics and boundaries, is that they would learn from other communities of teachers. I never hear anyone in the yoga community talk about talking to teachers in communities that have very, very well-developed and sophisticated conversations about sexual ethics. We do have rules and guidelines, but we also have a kind of well-developed way of thinking and talking about these things that I feel like is so nascent. It's so new in the yoga community. It kind of blows me away. So I think in response to what you said, Ian, I want to say you're actually not at sea. You're not out in the middle of nowhere. Every great art and practice in this world has teachers. And every long-standing community of teachers has come up against issues of ethics and boundaries because teaching is a porous way to choose to spend your life.
I'm curious to know your opinion, though. Do you feel like those, and I completely agree with you, and I don't think that the yoga community is actually operating in a bubble that doesn't think that there aren't all of these kind of rules out there. And in the same way that I say that there is this funny relationship between being a professor or being a doctor or being a psychotherapist. I mean, all of these do
But I think the
back.
point I'm trying to make is about teaching, and that's why when people have the conversation about what's the difference between a yoga teacher and a rock star, invariably they start talking to you about yoga. And I want to say the difference between a yoga teacher and a rock star is that a yoga teacher is a teacher.
Yes, I would
And
agree.
that's
but
what makes the difference.
It's a slightly different kind of teacher, I would say. They're in the power dynamic relationship and navigating those murky waters. I agree that's inherent in any student-teacher relationship, and I agree with you that these are issues that have been hashed out in the academic world and resolved to some extent, and to some extent are always being rehashed. But I think that there is something that is inherent to what happens in a yoga class that's different than what happens in an art history class.
Look at what you're wearing.
Number one. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, I do feel like there's an intimacy and there are boundaries that are bust open emotionally, erotically, psychologically, that happen in yoga classes all the time that aren't happening on a regular basis academically.
I don't know, I have to say after 20 years, at least in the humanities, I would have to disagree with you. I mean, I watch students taught by, and the better the humanities teacher, and I can't speak to the sciences, the better the humanities teacher, the more the student has the experience of being worked over from the inside out in a way that we would really resonate with.
I think what you mean
we
by...
just don't touch them.
I think what you mean by better is more passionate, right? Like more...
Yeah, or something. I mean, I don't know what it is. All I'm saying is that
Because what you're saying about art history teacher, I mean, if an art history teacher really wears their heart on their sleeve, I think they'll have lots of people who are attracted to them versus saying things by rote and just, you know, repeating the same notes that they just repeated last semester.
But it's also great training. I mean, I know that we feel as yoga teachers that we're responsible for the whole being, but it's also been really great training, and I feel like you really spoke to this, Julia, in being a good listener and then saying to my students, and that is not my department, you know, that is not, and here's who to speak to or to go to if you want, but, you know, I will hear you, but it is absolutely, I don't feel responsible for taking care of part in either of my lives as a yoga teacher or when I was a mountaineering instructor before I was an English professor.
And
I also wanted to do that.
I think
right?
I'm really nodding a lot over here because I come from a family of teachers. I come from a mom and a dad are teachers, and my sister's a teacher now, a principal. So I grew up in a teaching community, and I grew up with watching and observing my parents teaching and how in very sticky situations, maybe not necessarily impassioned ones like we're speaking of, but really, really angry parents or, you know, just a lot of situations. My parents were thrown into the fire quite a bit as teachers, and I honor school teachers. I have so much respect for school teachers. Completely underpaid profession, if you ask me. But I think through observation of just watching my mom was like my number one teacher, and I just watched her listen more than anything. She was an active listener, but was still able to give out quite a bit of love, and had such great love from her community of students. So yeah, I think that ultimately it's our choices, it's our inner choice as a teacher to decide, do I get swept up in this moment, or do I just hold the space and be here for this person in a kind and but professional way. And I think, yeah.
I think this circles back to what Ian was saying about teachers now, not professors, but school teachers in the public school system can't put a Band-Aid on a student, because I mean that's taking the logic of controlling and creating rules and ethics and boundaries so far away from where I think we all agree that we want to be as a community, that we would so much, I mean, I think we would agree that we would so much rather suffer the pitfalls of there being people who go over the boundary or do something inappropriate, and that it will be resolved within ourselves in maybe a messy way. So much better that than there being rules about how exactly you can adjust a student. I mean, this is not really speaking to what you're saying, but I mean, I agree, but I also am very glad that we're not in the academic world where it's like, you'll get fired, you will lose tenure if you date your student in some places, you know, and I'm glad that we're not in that. I'm glad we're not in a structure like that, personally.
Yeah, and actually the academic world is moving away from that into more nuanced. I mean, that's what I mean when I say the conversation is happening. The conversation that you are yearning for is happening. And, you know, we could do, I think all I wanted to say is we could do a better job of actually talking to people in other fields who've thought these things for a lot longer.
Right.
We always talk about, like, this is such a new problem for us, and it's like, well, you know,
well, it's the oldest problem. I mean, just read the
exactly.
Bible or anything, or
it's
the Bhagavad Gita, you know.
So, anyway.
Yes.
I wasn't trying to say when we're out at sea that we're thinking that we're the only people who have these problems, because, yeah, exactly what you said. It happens in music. And I salute all teachers. I mean, you're just inspiring people, and we want to learn from you. Yeah, we're totally open into having conversations with other disciplines.
And as yoga teachers, we are multifaceted beings, so we are teachers. Some of us do kirtan, we turn into rock stars. Some of us, you know, we have our massage therapists, so all these different fields that have dealt with these things, I think it is smart to look at what does the law say about a massage therapist? What does the law say about a scientist or a professor? And I think there is a lot of wisdom. And again, we are multifaceted creatures that find hundreds of ways into students' hearts. And I come back for me to sustainability. If people are making the same mistake again and again and again, it's our opportunity as community members to be like, yo, this is not looking good. This is not feeling good. Why is this happening again? So I think that community is one answer, not necessarily rigid rules, but also just knowing that, this comes from the movie Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. This is real, and the more yoga you do, the more powerful you become, the more people you can touch, the more that you'll need the support of your peers, because people can get really drunk on power, and it's really important to, as we all rise each other up, that there is the potential that we can say, hey, tone it down a little bit here, sober up a little bit, because it is, people can have a really good relationship with alcohol. People can know exactly how to use it. Some people have really bad relationships, and I think that power is something that people can get drunk on, and
Can I just leverage off that a little bit? I mean, because I think we all know the issue that we're, talking about, and to me it was like, just to bring it back to that topic, and I wasn't surprised at all what happened in the Anusara community. I mean, it didn't. I've never been to an Anusara yoga class in my life. I'm one of the few people on the planet, but I was always talking to people about Anusara, and that was my big thing. Is like, how can you give up so much power to the system, right? Because what I saw about Anusara, I was looking at it and like, this is a beautiful system, but it kind of negates other systems in a sense that it's not. Anusara, I mean, it's not yoga is good for you, but Anusara yoga is good for you. And the language of that is what bothered me, and seemed to really put the leader up on a pedestal. And everyone, not everyone, but it seemed like there was a lot of giving up of people's power to guru, so to speak. And that was, I didn't think the whole thing would crumble the way it did, but it was a check-in for that. I just wanted everyone to speak to that point.
I think all systems run the risk of insularity, whatever field it is or whatever tradition it is. And that's a real concern and a real contemplation, that if within a system, of course, if someone's deeply aligned in a system and that's what they're choosing and devoting themselves to, on some level, they do think it's the best. But the remembrance is that it's the best for that individual in that particular wave of time. And for me, I was with Anusara from its little seedling days, from the very beginning. And I can tell you with all honesty, I never experienced Anusara as the best. For me it was the most gorgeous, solid ground that I could plant my feet in and grow my creativity and collaborate with all my friends. I mean, this is how I met Janet and Jason and Nicholas and Amanda. I was an Anusara teacher, but we wove together. We've been weaving together for several years, as multiple traditions. And it's more about, if you align deeply in a tradition, go for it. And be masterful and be fluent and be as truly lit up as you can be within that tradition and system. And then remember that we're really all one family and one yoga, and take our mastery and weave it together and create the most gorgeous tapestry possible out of the mastery and the fluency with what we really know. And this is how I experienced, Anusara. I'm not rushing to defend it in any sort of way. I'm just saying that any system runs the risk of insularity, and it will be the responsibility within, the teachers that represent that system to pave the way of collaboration and co-creation, and to remember the bigger wholeness, of who we all are together.
Yeah, and I think in terms of what Sianna's saying too is that there is, I also taught Anusara for many years, and when I decided to leave the system, the very first thing every single studio that I was working with asked me what are you going to call it, right? They actually wanted a brand name. What are you going to call it? Because brand is easy to sell. And in terms of a global brand, it was just something that so many people had a great experience with, and they became attracted to that experience. Not necessarily to, most people actually didn't know who started Anusar, where it came from. When I traveled in different parts of the world, they had no idea who John was, right? But they'd had a connection with their local teacher who was feeding them this love of the practice that was very skillful, like Siana said. And in that sense, they started to call it something, and they said, okay, that's what I'm practicing. And I think we all have a hard time putting we all seek to label things. It's just easy. That's how we categorize the world around us. And it was very hard for me to tell people I teach yoga. You know, what kind of yoga do you teach? Well, you know, and then you have to give them the whole story. I did this, I started in Iyengar, I did Ashtanga, I did Vinaya, and you're going to say, now I'm doing this, you know? So, and then at the end they go, oh, you're doing your own thing. It's like, yeah, okay, yes, that's what I'm doing. But I have no idea how we got into this conversation. Was there a root question? Oh yeah, you brought it up. Yeah. No, and I agree with Siana. One of the things that it's allowed me to do is actually look into myself. And when this all happened, the very first question I asked myself is, what am I teaching? What am I teaching? And yes, I have these tools. I have this system that I've grown from, and it's acted kind of like a planter for my tree to grow. But what am I teaching? And at that moment, I had to become very, very clear about what it is I do and why. And which goes back to what you said earlier, is why are we doing what we do? Would we do it for free? You know, and the answer when I was breaking away is I had to ask myself that question too. Will I continue to do this for free? If I go in tomorrow saying it's just yoga and there's nobody there, am I okay with that? And my answer was yes, I'm okay with that. I'm very happy there was people there. So, but, and I'm actually, I think, like you said, it's the white water in the ocean, is that it was something that we all had to, kind of, an obstacle that was presented to the community, the world community at large. I don't go anywhere now on the planet where people have not heard about that. So it has become an obstacle that has allowed us to grow on so many levels. I mean, for myself, just reaching out to other communities and dropping all that and saying, okay, like, what's blissology about? You know, I want to get some of that, you know? So, and I think it's just an opportunity. So, thanks, brother.
Okay, on that note, guys, we are going to have to wrap it up, but can we please just put our hands together? That's incredible. Thank you all so much. Awesome.